start this video off by giving you a term that you most likely have never heard of before. You ready for this? Morphogenesis. Morphogenesis. Here it is right here. Tell me if you've ever heard of that term in the chat box or in the comment section below. Morphogenesis is basically this. It is figuring out what is a win-win for everybody, right? Morphogenesis is basically the family's ability to grow and adapt to change while also maintaining balance and stability. And a male with borderline personality disorder can feel like one of the most difficult tasks. Borderline personality disorder, or BPD for short, is a diagnosis that usually entails an extensive history. But when it's your own father, maybe your brother, maybe your husband, maybe your boyfriend, it's a little bit more difficult than just come into my office, let's do an assessment, let's talk about borderline personality disorder. We have to get to the bottom of why relationships are so difficult with men who have borderline personality disorder. To make things more complicated, let's add to the mix abuse. If you have a male in your life who has the traits of borderline personality disorder, but also is an abuser within your family, maybe the parent-child dynamic, maybe between you and your husband, right? Or if you're dating, maybe between you and your boyfriend, whatever the case may be, if this male has borderline personality disorder and also has abusive behaviors, then we've got a terrible mix. So in today's video, I'm gonna highlight what men with borderline personality disorder look like. But before we jump in, let me briefly introduce myself in case you are new. My name is Tamara. I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist. I'm licensed in mental health. I specialize in treating children, teens, and families, as well as adults who are dealing with trauma. Let's go ahead and jump in. You know, I'm pretty confident in my role as a psychotherapist, and I've had a lot of training. I've had both personal and professional experience. I also tend to walk by faith in my career where, you know, if I have something motivate me or kind of fill my heart with passion and compassion, then I go in that way. So I'm pretty intuitive and I love learning in my field. However, if I get a male with borderline personality disorder, that is the one case that I'm gonna have to refer. One of the reasons why is because men who have borderline personality disorder tend to be a little bit more complicated than women. With women, for example, borderline personality disorder may come across as really being emotional, highly sensitive, really desiring love and affection, having addictions like drug addiction, sex addiction, love addiction, you know, any kind of addiction. You may also notice in a female with borderline personality disorder, manipulative behaviors. It could be intentional or unintentional. You may also recognize triangulation, where the female with borderline personality disorder in that triangle is the victim, somebody's the rescuer, and the other person is the persecutor. So women with borderline personality disorder may engage in those triangles. They may also be highly jealous, experience dysphoria, be really impulsive and filled with rage when they feel rejected or unloved or abandoned. Women with borderline personality disorder, for me personally, and maybe even professionally, I have to look up the research, is a little easier for me to detect. But when it comes from a man, that's a whole other dynamic. Men with borderline personality disorder do not tend to be researched as much as they should be. And so the wider public, the society that we live in, and sometimes even in professional settings, that gets overlooked. It's difficult to identify a man with borderline personality disorder. So what are some of the behaviors, right, that you are likely to see in a male with borderline personality disorder? Well, let me just say, most have a history of assault, battery or domestic violence. Others may struggle with PTSD or poor attachment to their parents, to relationships, to their children, right? To people all around them. They don't have the ability to attach emotionally and psychologically in a healthy way. When they do attach, it's almost like a desperate attachment where if you do one small thing against them, or you do something that really isn't personal, but it's something that you do, they may take that as a huge slight and really hold grudges and really be angry with you and filled with a lot of rage. Men with borderline personality disorder also tend to be very disinterested in treatment. They reject it, they refuse it, they oppose it. They don't want anything to do with treatment, right? Because number one, they don't think they're the problem. And number two, I just have anger issues, right? So men tend to take their symptoms and minimize it and put it on a small plate, whereas women tend to say something is wrong with me and I have to get help. Men with borderline personality disorder may also be described by their friends and family as wild, angry, a bully, a stalker, or these statements, right, become a part of the man's identity because he's been tagged with them so much. And so now he begins to act out those behaviors when he gets angry, or when someone slights him, or when he feels abandoned. Now, going into the clinical symptoms for men with borderline personality disorder, let me highlight a couple of things you're going to want to know about. The first clinical sign of male borderline personality disorder is likely to be a disproportionate reaction to the environment and to reality. Now, borderline personality disorder really is a very highly emotional and intense disorder. And people who suffer from borderline personality disorder tend to engage in life in really intense ways. Intense happiness, intense anger, intense emotional reactivity. This is just who they are. And not everybody, let me correct that, not everybody with a borderline personality, but most individuals with borderline personality disorder tend to be very intense in almost everything that they do. But men who have borderline personality disorder, they tend to show a disproportionate reaction to the trigger. Something very small may trigger this huge outburst, property destruction, domestic violence, right? It may even trigger rape and assault. It depends on what that trigger is, but the trigger tends to be smaller than the man with borderline personality disorder believes it to be. You're also likely going to see an inflated sense of self and an inflated, if I can say it, sense of entitlement. And what I mean by that is, this particular male may walk around with this invincible arrogance that says, I'm the best. I know you want me, right? You can't live without me, and I'm going to get what I want. I'm sure you've seen men like that, right? They have this confidence about them, and they're very emotional, sexual, passionate, all of that. And unfortunately, while it may reel you in initially, you're probably going to be sorry. And especially if that individual has borderline personality disorder and tends to be abusive, right? So they're highly intense on one side, and then on the other side, they will beat you and harm you and assault you and rape, and the list goes on, right? They may even engage in, burglars and robbery and, intense intimidation of other people, road rage, violence, anger, right? So men with borderline personality disorder, they show a different set of symptoms that you have to be aware of. The next thing is substance abuse and a negative view of women or children. Not all men with borderline personality disorder will, of course, engage this way, but there are some who will. They don't like women. They don't care for children. They want nothing to do with that. You, as the female, for example, is there to satisfy their need for the moment. Let's say this is your father. You're there to clean the house, get the mail, let the dog out, and leave. He wants nothing else to do with you. If you are a wife of a husband like this, right, you're there for his sexual pleasure, but after that he has other things to do, right? If you have a brother like this or a male friend like this, you're probably going to be ghosted, for lack of a clinical term, more so than you thought you would or that you'd like to be. And so, this particular individual is almost like a chameleon, they go in and out of character, in and out of emotions, in and out of thoughts. And so it's hard to keep up with what's going on. So you may sense this negative view of you as a woman, you as a grandmother, brother, right? You as a mother, you as a sister, as a girlfriend, and children. Sometimes children get on the male's nerve, you know? And a lot of times in families where there's a husband and a wife and children, the wife and the children presses the wrong buttons on the man, the father and the husband that has borderline personality. And so rage can come out, and, you know, property destruction and screaming and yelling. It's a very chaotic kind of a home life with men like this. You should probably also be aware that these kind of men also have strong addictions. Not always, but sometimes they do. Drug abuse, alcohol abuse, gambling, sex abuse, pornography, addiction. That's the word I'm looking for. There's a lot of what's the word, guys, that I'm looking for? There's a lot of two-faced behaviors with this individual. I'll just use that as an example. One minute they're these respectable men of society, and the next minute, you know, they're in their bedroom with the lights off watching pornography. Or they do really well at work and come home and terrorize and bully everyone. So there's a lot of conflicting roles that this particular man can play. The next thing is poor self-esteem and poor self-image. Men with borderline personality disorder tend to struggle quite a bit with who they are as men, with who they are as fathers, with who they are as sons and brothers, uncles. You know, they don't have an identity most of the time that they are comfortable with. They tend to cloak themselves with false confidence. Some even come across as narcissistic and sociopathic, and don't you dare reject them in any way, because they're going to blow up, get upset, and not know how to control themselves. And then, you know, you're probably likely to sustain some injuries emotionally, physically, psychologically. The next thing is violence and intense anger and self-injurious behaviors. Sometimes these particular men, especially if they are untreated, will cut themselves, burn themselves, engage in really intense physical behavior that can lead to broken bones, that could lead to death, premature death, right? They didn't want to kill themselves, but what they did was so risky that it ended up killing them. You may have these particular men as well use self-soothing behaviors that are not okay, or use substance abuse and hope that they don't die, but that they get close enough to dying that they feel this euphoria. There's actually something known as, and you may have heard of this before, the choking game. It's when an individual engages with another person in choking that person up into the point where they get so close to dying or losing consciousness that they let go. They put their hands around your neck, or they put something around your neck and pull on it until it looks like you're at the point to pass out, but not necessarily, right? You're almost there. You may be 1 point away from passing out. It gives this sense of euphoria. And so some men that have borderline personality disorder engages in those kind of behaviors. Using heroin is also another way to kind of get this euphoria and this kind of high, you know? And so men with borderline personality disorder tend to engage in those kind of risky behaviors. They also may engage in suicide attempts and succeed. Research suggests that men tend to succeed at committing suicide more so than women. One of the reasons why is women tend to commit suicide with overdosing. Men tend to commit suicide with weapons, so guns, knives, things like that. And so they tend to be a little bit more successful, so to speak, in committing and completing their suicide as opposed to women. So men with borderline personality disorder may engage in some really intense behaviors, like not just slitting their wrist, but using heroin and alcohol and another substance like Oxycontin to kind of give them that sense that they're going to die. They may also do things like jump off of bridges, for example, and they may even play Russian roulette with a loaded gun. These are the kind of behaviors that you're likely to see in men who have borderline personality disorder. If you want to see a little bit more of an intense video, I guess I could say, on failed suicide attempts and kind of what that entails, check out this video right here that I did over 2 years ago. You might be able to get some information from there that is helpful to you. Men who have borderline personality disorder, they are complicated individuals. You may be wondering, is there some kind of treatment that's available? Absolutely. Is there something I can do to help? Absolutely. I think the first step is trying to help that male understand something is wrong. You are not supposed to exist like this in the world. You do not have to be miserable. You could be at least more balanced in your mood and in your affect. Let's go get some help. That may be helpful. A lot of men, as you know, put up a defense barrier. They don't want to talk about their mental health, right? So it may be helpful for you to lay something down on a counter or table that talks about men's depression, or male depression, I should say, male borderline personality disorder, and hope that he picks it up. That might be a nice passive and indirect way of getting those materials to him. You can also do something that's also a little passive, like, send a website link to him and say it was an accident, because he's probably going to open up that email and click on the link, and it'll show on the website male depression or male borderline personality disorder. So you want to find some creative ways to kind of get your point across that they need help. This is not healthy for you, and it's not healthy for them. Thank you so much for being with me in today's video. Go ahead and hit that subscribe and bell button if you want to stick around with us, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.